Hey, good evening. It's Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb riffing on Friday evening, July 28th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. my time. Hope you guys are having a great Friday, summer eve. And, obviously, like always, things are coming at us fast and furious. We'll keep it tight because, I'm kind of in this mindset where, we had this Truth Bomb Twitter Spaces yesterday, and I have done a lot of these things recently, basically impromptu, and whoever shows up, we riff and we talk and we try to bring things together. And the last one that we did was pretty intriguing because we had one gentleman from the UK. I know later that some folks in Australia were listening, and we had some other people that had some really important things to reveal. And since then we've had quite a few people, check it out, view it, that sort of thing. And so, I'm kind of enthusiastic about continuing this sort of initiative. But I was really impressed, inspired, hopeful regarding one comment in particular. A guy said, hey, Patrick, I watch your Truth Bombs, and, it's amazing to me that not more people are watching this. It's incredible, quite frankly. He's like, I've got your back, and I'm all in. And, I'm in to see where we go with this whole thing. And I was like, right on, making some impact, and love to hear the feedback. So if you don't mind me asking you at the top of this, please like and subscribe and share. My friends, I've got the information that could turn this whole incredible ocean liner Titanic of corruption upside down, inside out, before it once again train wrecks and destroys and shipwrecks everything that we think we are, because things are literally out of hand. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Things are getting more out of control every single day, particularly on Twitter, and I'll address that in a minute. But it was great to get the feedback. But what am I doing? Who am I? Well, I'm desperately trying to somehow penetrate your headspace and get your attention to make you understand that I have the answers to the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, and is our system, and literally impacts all of you, all of us, in every single dimension. And everything that it reveals is the hidden aristocracy that, of course, our country rebelled against, and the hidden aristocracy that's been around for, maybe since the beginning of society and the way it operates, but because of technology and the law and other elements of overwhelming information, and the speed of which things get out there, and misinterpretation and disinformation and all of those things, it's nearly impossible to just simply reveal the emperor's new clothes. And it's the most asinine situation I've ever been in my entire life, because I don't feel like I need to reinvent the wheel night in and night out. I don't need to re-explain and recalibrate everything that's going on in the world to have you go, oh, that's what he's trying to tell me. Now I suddenly get it. Except with that caveat, I will say that what's on my mind, because right before I press play on this, I was listening to Alex Wagner on MSNBC. And, just for full transparency, I only watch Alex Wagner because she's a kid. She's a cute, relatively intellectually smart, kind of quick on her feet, with a great personality, a television host that I know has absolutely zero experience in most of the things that she is supposed to interact with over the course of the hour of her program on prime time that precedes Lawrence O'Donnell, who is, she's basically replacing Rachel Maddow. And she doesn't have Rachel Maddow's, shall we say, quiver of understanding of the history of the world and everything that she plays out. But maybe that's a good thing. But Rachel Maddow served a purpose, and Alex Wagner is not Rachel Maddow, but Alex Wagner serves a purpose. And she happened to just say, as she's interviewing Andrew Weissman, she says, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not even an investigator, but this is kind of how I see it. And it's like, yeah, but you only see that much of it when you're not an investigator and you don't have experience and you don't understand the way the world is. And so you're just experiencing it for the first time, which makes you somebody who's not qualified to reveal and refract the information necessary for the American public to deep dive, to fully engage. But at the same time, you serve a purpose, because why? I don't know, maybe a demographic, you've got a cute personality, and ultimately, you're reading from a teleprompter. Okay, that's part of the problem with mainstream. But let's talk about, for example, Andrew Weissman, and ultimately what I have in context to what's going on 24/7 in front of us that I need to somehow break through the membrane of your disconnect to make you understand, aha, Holy Mother of God. Patrick Lovell has the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, that affects everybody because our country is not the United States of America, of which we've all been taught to believe in and actually participate in through our faith, because the whole system is supposed to be, abide by the law with integrity. Now, most of us, again, I use these very basic elementary concepts. So, apologize if I have to, reframe it every time to just kind of set the tone, which is like, look, systems have got to work. If you're driving in your city and you've got lights, at intersections, you need them to work properly for traffic to function properly without it turning into chaos. If you get into a building, you need that building to withstand whatever nature throws at it, not to mention you need everything to work properly to be able to get from level 1 to level 69 or whatever freaking office you're in, and you need to do it safely. So therefore, it has to have, professionals and specs and operating procedures and manuals and systems to make sure it all operates the way that we need to function in a modern society. That's pretty easy to understand. And so the thing that gets really murky and convoluted is political power and money, primarily, and of course geopolitics and everything with military power and all of that kind of stuff. So we have the law, we have the government, we have finance, all of which are supposed to operate a specific way, which is within the confines of the regulations that make them operate safe, which we call the safety and soundness of the United States financial system, for example. And anyone in politics, as we can see right now, has to, if they're elected, they're a part of a government that's supposedly a democracy that serves the people, of, by, and for the people. But of course, we all know that's a myth. We all know that's ridiculous. It's not of, by, and for the people. It's of, by, and for the corporations that pay for the corrupt politicians to go inside the corridors of power based on their ability to get things done for those corporations against whatever the population wants. And so what we see on display every day, all day, no matter what the situation is, we see this nonstop fountainhead of Trump being indicted or investigated for this and that and the other thing. And the way it's all laid out is incredible, because it proves that there are laws that people have to operate within those parameters, and if they don't, there's a chance that they're breaking the law and could be held accountable. And as we've seen so far, I think Donald Trump's up to 78 indictments, more to come. Obviously, the latest news with the Jack Smith investigation to this, person, who was the guy who was told, I think of, Jimmy Kimmel's sidekick, the Mexican sidekick guy, as maybe this guy for Trump that's supposed to, get rid of the evidence, when the subpoena came down of some of the top secret clearance information that he had held down at Mar-a-Lago. And then, the other side of this stuff is that, what was Weissman just talking about? I guess Alex Wagner had actually brought up, and this actually, I think, is important to kind of configure the sort of relevancy of what it is that I'm continuing to try to reveal to you. So Alex Wagner talks briefly about that there was an operator that was taking orders from Trump during and plugging in calls and people he was talking to. She was a switchboard operator at the White House. And apparently there's X amount of time that's missing. I mean, it kind of seems like the Watergate tapes and that sort of thing. And, she's actually been investigated by the January 6th Insurrection Committee. And, she's basically taken the fifth. She's like, I don't have any recollection of this, that, and the other. And, Wagner gets all excited about the fact that there's X amount of minutes of this tape missing, and who would have Trump been talking to at that time, and who was involved and where might the threads lead to. And then there's also all sorts of other information that we find that the Department of Justice pretty much has access to everything. And there are definitely question marks about what obviously is legal and not, because we all know tech, we could pretty much find out anything. I mean, that's why 9/11 is ridiculously stupid that we haven't solved that issue yet. Not to mention, and we had plenty of tech at that time, trust me. not nearly as sophisticated as what we have now. And of course, what's going on with January 6th, more of the same. But meanwhile, as it turns out, and I happened to mention on Twitter earlier this week, it came to my attention vis-a-vis Wall Street on Parade, and Ben Bernanke, the former Federal Reserve chairman who replaced Alan Greenspan, both of whom I talk about frequently on these truth bombs, happened to be involved with 98 meetings that were erased from the record during a time period of the collapse of Bear Stearns and ultimately the trillions upon trillions upon trillions of bailouts that I continue to bring to your attention in service to what I'll probably lay out in a minute, and I've laid out a million times. Unfortunately, some of you are listening, but somehow we got to penetrate to the tens of millions of people that need to get this information. And so who was Ben Bernanke again? Chairman of the Federal Reserve. Who was he meeting with? We don't know. What was he meeting about? Well, we can certainly configure that there was a meltdown at Bear Stearns. We ended up with Federal Reserve Act 13.3, where we put BlackRock in charge of basically administrating the emergency funds because they tried to prevent, at that time period, a systemic collapse that was obviously on its way, that ultimately led to the 13 banks meeting with later Hank Paulson, who was the former Secretary of the Treasury, with former president of the New York Federal Reserve, who was supposed to regulate all of Wall Street, but didn't because he's such an idiot. And he was working with former, CEO of Citigroup. This is what he came up, through Sandy Weil and Jamie Dimon, which I'll come back to in a minute. Obviously, Jamie Dimon is the CEO of the largest bank in the United States and probably one of the most powerful people in the United States. And he certainly vectors into this whole story in a very big way. But ultimately, there were these 98 meetings because what happened was 13 banks were called behind closed doors where Hank Paulson gave them all a 3-page document that said, you're going to accept what we're going to tell you to do on these terms, sign. And they all did because they all knew that it was a whole fraud scheme that was about to blow up the world, and it did. And so the government, was trying to piecemeal all of these emergency processes behind the scene with the transition between George Bush's administration and Barack Obama's. And Barack Obama was out in front of it saying, look, man, I'm the guy to save the day. I'm going to ride in on a white horse. I've got this populist crusade to make, hope we can believe in, right? Change we can believe in. That was his platitudes. And ultimately, he ends up putting all of the people that created what destroyed the world in positions of power. And oh yeah, by the way, our director, or the chair of the Federal Reserve, has 98 meetings behind closed doors that nobody knows who he was talking to, but we know what the outcome was. That the outcome was a backdoor of $30 trillion. Trillion. There's a billion. There's 1,000 billion in a trillion. $30 trillion to backstop what was a massive criminal racketeering enterprise that blew up the world based on everything we show you in the con at www.thecon.tv, that were moved into action illegally because of all of the statutes of the lender of last resort capacity of the United States through Federal Reserve Act 13.3 that enabled the Federal Reserve with the flip of a switch to basically say, hey, Wall Street, you destroyed the world. Everybody's fucking running for cover. Who knows how many lives you destroyed in this absolute, nuclear Armageddon of the global financial system based on fraud, which again, we show you in the con at www.thecon.tv. Oh, okay. Nobody knows it because we've got secret meetings and we can get away with it. Here's $30 trillion. Now, of course, Alex Wagner, being the newbie to the scene that she is, admits on national television tonight, oh yeah, I'm not an investigator. I don't have a law degree. I don't know much about this stuff, but this is how I'm seeing it. And, oh boy, I'm really excited about the missing 2 minutes of this operator, recording, that I'm going to dial in on because it proves who Trump was talking to and who was in on the insurrection and all of that stuff. Okay. Can you see the scale, first and foremost, in how media can be really a dim-witted, useful idiot in this whole process? Don't get me wrong. Andrew Weissman isn't. Andrew Weissman's at the top of his game. But it's really easy to hyper-focus on the easiest moronic criminal in the history of the world, which is Donald freaking Trump. And by the way, Donald Trump, everything that he is being investigated for, everything, okay? That through the 78 indictments, all of the different parameters of the law of the United States of America, who's circling the wagons and tightening the noose around the biggest idiot moron in the history of the world that has millions of followers on Twitter. that lie all day, every day about things that are so ridiculous and absurd. But of course, Elon Musk says this is all about free speech. Meanwhile, what I'm observing looks to me like a platform that's like version 4.0 of what's come from before, from the Koch brothers to Americans for Prosperity, during the transition of the great financial crisis and the Bush administration and Obama and everything that led to then Mercer's and ultimately Cambridge Analytica and all of the Russian bots that were involved with these troll farms in the 2016 election, that now guys like Matt Taibbi, who was one of the greatest journalists in the United States, is now all in on MAGAville, because when you've got MAGA eyeballs on your stuff, you can generate a lot of revenue and being in the zeitgeist, and that's the decision he's chosen to in this, exploitive atmosphere, to basically cherry pick what you want to say about certain things, and ultimately, as it relates to, going back to Donald Trump and all of the things that he's being investigated for and indicted for and everything else, that has the same DNA of everything that I'm revealing to you, except Donald Trump, and I hate to use this analogy because we all know he's got such tiny hands, but he's tiny. He's a drop in the bucket for what it is I'm revealing to you. And meanwhile, all over Twitter, and that's where I was going with my kind of like evolution of how this whole thing worked. We went through Cambridge Analytica and the Russian troll bots and all of that hate generated in 2016, which was early stuff, compared to what we're seeing now. And we know billionaires are, puppeteering so many things behind the scenes. But if you see on Twitter, for example, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lowen Bobart, Carrie Lake, now I'm seeing more Ted Cruz and others, McCarthy, yada, 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 all day. Oh, and Lauren, God, why do I want to say Breitbart, but the woman from Fox is just insane. They're all lying. They're all cherry picking. They're all using this formula: lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. And let's talk about Biden. And I'm not a Biden. I'm not defending Biden. From this perspective, I'm about to say, if you wanted to talk about Biden corruption, you would just talk about his entire time in office: Delaware, LLCs, corporations, credit cards, military-industrial complex, credit card complex, and of course what he was doing in terms of censorship way back in the day. And oh yeah, by the way, I think he was actually a little bit, as I recall, might have been a little bit soft, or was he one of the lead bulldogs on Clarence Thomas? I think he eventually was a little soft, I think, during the Anita Hill trials, which obviously, has some major repercussions now. But whether it's Jack Smith's investigation with the criminal fraud exception, when he talks about attorneys lying on behalf of Donald Trump in court, which of course they're doing. It's obvious. They've got him. They're busted. That's it. But can lawyers lie in court? Oh, yeah, they do. And if you bust them, the criminal fraud exception is what you use. Oh, by the way, Lawrence Tribe on Lawrence O'Donnell all the time impugns the integrity of the court of Judge Eileen Cannon based on her being basically what? A puppet of the Republican Party, put into her position during the Trump administration. Oh, yeah, based on what we're seeing in the Supreme Court and what's going on here. Yeah, that makes sense. But meanwhile, we have a relationship with a guy named Bruce Jacobs who's impugned the integrity of court because of all of the corruption that's happened in Florida courts based on tens of millions of documentation fabrication that plays into the Donald Trump scenario too, because of course we had the elector certification stuff that just came down the pike, with all the conspirators in Michigan with 16 felony counts, and yeah, that's part of it. And we're about to see RICO come down the pike in Georgia with Fani Willis, and then everything that's happening with Letitia James up in upstate New York. In New York, the AG of New York, is all control fraud. What we show you in the con at www.thecon.tv. So the entire apparatus of the legal parameters from the Department of Justice and the DA and AGs and attorneys and other or DAs, and then of course special counsel and the DOJ. All of these guys are revealing what's illegal in the case of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is going down for defrauding the United States of America, which he did. But they're showing you that this is what's illegal, and he's going to go down for it. And it might create a civil war because we let this thing go on so long that all of the Twitter bots are being extremely effective, and all of the fucking zombie apocalypse of MAGA land because they're too stupid to understand anything about our country because of just insane, breakdowns in what our country has become, especially in our education system and, in our job situation and everything else. I mean, look, what I'm revealing to you above all else, okay, and it's got to penetrate, and you've got to get on board because it's this goddamn simple. We have given tens of trillions of dollars to billionaires and multinationals in the financial system illegally, which is socialism for criminals, for the past 13 years. That have gutted this nation. It's been, good for the top 10% because they've been invested in the system and, increase in appraisals for real estate and stocks, that in the bull run and everything else. That's done well for the people invested in the system who actually have ownership in the system. But everybody else who's basically poor and isn't invested or hasn't gotten there because maybe they got wiped out in 2008 and they couldn't rebound from that and everything else, which is 13 years of this insane system going to this insanity where literally poor people and stupid people are expendable. And it's funny because they don't know that they're being bulldozed illegally. They don't know that the system is robbing them blind. And then ultimately here comes this joker, Donald Trump, who's like, look, I'm going to get mine. Okay? And I'm going to turn all these guys against you. So it's really interesting from a standpoint that, A, I should shake Donald Trump's hand one day and fist bump him when he's behind bars and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was you who led America to understand of what we did in the con, because the entirety of the censorship industrial complex with all of the media that is funded by the people that we expose, which is all of Wall Street and our financial system and the legal system that let them get away with it, they're all getting funded by the mechanisms that we reveal. So they can't let this out. This is like comparing, if we're comparing it to Watergate, Watergate is literally a grain on the sand and we're the sun. It's just monumentally bigger, and the same goes for all things Donald Trump. That is not to say that Donald Trump is not a threat. That is not to say that Donald Trump doesn't need to be taken down, although I'd argue he probably should have been taken down a year ago. But the coordination of all of this stuff happening all over the country, it's part PR, part all of this other things and everything else. Meanwhile, you cannot see the real corruption, even though everybody on the right who are these bots that are definitely part of some sort of, Mercer, troll farm that basically sends these messages out all day, or Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are just paid to type a script if they're actually doing it themselves. But meanwhile, the question that you have to ask, and the question I have to ask, given my above analogy, is like, all right, well, like, who is Elon Musk? I mean, I was a huge Elon Musk fan because I am all about paradigm change. The electric vehicle and solar and even his SpaceX odysseys and everything else were always forward-moving and very thought-provoking in science and all of these wonderful things and the genius. But then you look back on his career and you're like, okay, well, he came out of what, fintech, right? Basically moving money, and that's what became, got him to become a billionaire. And then what? He had great, technology that he probably, I would imagine, collaborated, bought, purchased, maybe lifted, who knows, from the science that already existed to create Tesla. But as far as I know, and I'm not an expert on all things Tesla, but I think that Tesla was the recipient of massive, massive, massive government grants, and it basically is an American car company that, of course, he managed, and it wasn't profitable for how many years? I think 12, 13 years before suddenly it became profitable. And, because of all of the different schemology of what happens with modern executive compensation and how CEOs use control fraud and basically how brokers trade things. Oh, yeah, he became the richest guy in the world, bar none. And I think December, he was up to $265 billion. I think he's $170 billion. Meanwhile, I have got the $29 trillion truth. Again, there's 1,000 billion in a trillion. So you do the math of how much more weighty the information I'm giving you is the guy who bought Twitter that suddenly looks to me like it's in cahoots with the Mercers, the Bannons, whatever, the monkey business is with somebody downstream from Blackwater and Eric Prince and all of the Bannon sort of accolades and the billionaires that were involved with the guys paying for Judge Alito and Judge Clarence Thomas and all of the corruption. Would they not be paying for the techno bots to be able to slam this information all day, every day on this platform that's supposedly free speech? And then it's all about, outing the censorship of the previous administration through Jack Dorsey and everything that Matt Taibbi has revealed. Meanwhile, I know I'm being censored. I've seen it. So the only thing I can rely on is go watch the con. www.thecon.tv. Check out all my Truth Bomb riffs at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con on YouTube. Check it out on TikTok if you happen to be there. If you go to the most important critical situation of all of it, happens to be what we call Deception Owns You. If you go to Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con and you look at live and you pull down that tab, there's an 11-hour filibuster where we lay it all out with all of the experts from all over the country with all sorts of evidence that reveals exactly what I'm telling you. If you have the stomach to listen to 11 hours, those of you who are in the courts might want to, because it tells you everything you need to know. And by the way, like I said at the beginning, the con is the ultimate DNA and blueprint for you to understand, for anybody who didn't got swept up in the housing industry, to understand what's going on in your country. And how the system is ultimately an aristocracy that uses criminality and fraud through racketeering and bubbles and deception, and they own the courts. So we are, exactly what we rebelled against to become the United States in the first place, and I can assure you that we are not separation of powers, which is on display with everything I've told you throughout this whole thing. So look, we've got to raise money because billionaires spend billions to grift trillions. I need your buy-in, because that's the only way other people are going to pay attention, to get millions of people engaged, invested. If 357,000 of you, donated $13, you'd match what we already have in this. Okay, we've got $4.5 million in getting the $29 trillion truth that the $90 billion apparatus of the federal government through the DOJ, the SEC, the FBI, OCC, and all of the different regulatory bodies with 10,000 plus employees didn't do for you. I did with my team. But the bottom line is, it is what I'm telling you. It's exactly what I'm telling you. It reveals that the freaking emperor's new clothes. And that we've all been conned, and that we've all been betrayed, and we've all been deceived. And the bottom line is that, Don the Con, or Teflon Don, depending on whatever the outcome is, he's all of it, and then some. But everything that the government is proving with regards to Donald Trump, who's one guy, and trust me, his apparatus in January 6th is much bigger than the January 6th investigation or, Congressional Inquiry Committee figured out. I guarantee you that. I mean, who was able to get the freaking military to stand down? You had this freaking, 10,000 MAGA supporters or however many fly in, get holed up in all of these hotels. How'd they get there? Who were they? Why were there so many cops and former, military guys? They all got there on their own time? I doubt it. Bottom line is, then you've got the National Guard stand down. Then you've got all the military within the Beltway, which is, it's just like a plane flying into the Pentagon, by the way. Right? How'd that happen? I mean, come on. Because someone let it happen. Otherwise, what's the point of this giant apparatuses that could look up your ass if they wanted to? Okay? Look, if we had 1,300 people right now, we're off the ground running with doing this thing by the book, by the 501c3, to create transparency, to get this truth to the tens of millions of people that aren't hearing it because they're overwhelmed with lies and they buy lies. If 13 million of you came on board, we'd create a new party. The anti-corruption party, whatever the fuck we call it. The bottom line is that we have the details to create a national Lollapalooza-like barnstorming tour to go directly to the people in all the major cities and ultimately wind up in Washington, D.C. under the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who said, a nation of this earth, a nation of by and for the people shall not perish from the earth. We are going to create that. We are going to do our duty as citizens of the United States by propping up the truth they all held from you, because I got it. It took me years, and I sacrificed everything, and I got destroyed, and I'm not backing down now. I'm not backing down now. I'm all the way, man. I'm going all the way, because you know what? When you got the truth, you're bulletproof. And this infected tens of millions of people. If you've got the answers that could change the world and save the world for the world that you have a vision for, that actually, is if you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity, the sanctity of dignity and decency, and most importantly, within the system of law, integrity, and ultimately sustainability for liberty and justice for all. If we unite in unity, we will purge the misery of tyranny, and corruption burrows and fuels fascism. If you donate, think of it as donate, invest, whatever you want to invest in. I mean, think about it as. It's not charity. It's the fight the Borg that's destroying you. And I've got the answers, and you didn't spend $4.5 million in your whole life to get a divorce and lose, everything that mattered to you to get to the freaking top of the mountain, with the freaking tablets of what is truth. Whatever. This is Exodus from corruption. And then, of course, we'll create the, hopefully if everything came together and we had millions, on the same page and we knew what was going on, we'd create the, the redemption of the American dream, right? And everything that's supposed to be, because we are so corrupt. We are so insanely rotted to the core, where your media has lied to you incessantly, where tech lies to you like there is no tomorrow. Yeah, I am not lying. I just not who I am. I've got the truth that can set us all free, okay? And you've got to invest, because if you're not invested, you're the product, which means they're pissing on your head, telling you it's rain. They must have thought you were some kind of new fool because you're acting like a chump or a fool, a tool in the fool circus. Hey, man, it's just the end of the world if we don't pull our shit together. It's the end of America as we know it. And do you want stupid, fat, freaking morons who don't know anything about anything having a victory over you? Telling you what to think, telling you what you drive, telling you what to consume, telling you how you can think, maybe throwing you in jail or torturing you or murdering. Are you going to give up this great nation and everything that, previous generations sacrificed to give you the freedoms for your citizenry? Are you going to turn your back on that so the freaking dumbest, most dim-witted morons amongst us could rise in unity to support a freaking idiot like Donald Trump? Are you going to let that happen? I'm not. But if we do it together, we will crush these guys. We will crush corruption and the fascism fuels. Failure is not an option. Onwards and upwards. Rise, roar, revolt. Thanks for listening.